It's the place you begin your journey, and consequently, also the place you end it. Yes, of course, we're talking about the HABS of Star Citizen. Hey guys, Morphologist here, and welcome back to an Architect Reviews, the only show in which you get to learn about architecture and game design at the same time. In this episode, we'll not only be going over these confining cubicles, but we'll also be discussing a parallel real-world design philosophy called metabolism, one that has its origins in 1960s post-war Japan. This fascinating, almost dystopian architectural style has inspired creatives through the generations in science fiction movies, books, and even games, as you'll see here in Star Citizen. It's always been my goal with this series to provide a source of constructive, helpful, and inspiring feedback. Of course, I never want to say that my perspective is the only and correct one. Design is, of course, subjective and iterative. There are always going to be ways to improve, and a true artist knows that no piece is ever truly complete. Also, be sure to stay tuned until the end for my conclusion and a special announcement. So, without further exposition, let's go to our first stop. Every journey that ever began in Star Citizen began in the easy HABS of Port Olisar. So you've probably seen this about a million times by now. So what I want to do is very quickly go over what I think is really interesting about this particular design. What I really like about it is the lighting and the coziness of it. Despite its small size, I think that it's adequately furnished, upholstered, and lit to serve its basic purpose and the narrative of what they are to represent. And I think narrative really is the important thing to take from this. Yes, we could examine each individual detail, but really it's about the tone that it's trying to set, the message it's trying to convey, and that's you live in a society where you're essentially a cog in a machine. Every space is a one-size-fits-all, an amalgamation of prefabricated components. And so, really, you get a sense that you don't really matter if you live in this sort of HAB, that you're just beginning your journey, and I think for that reason, it's very well designed. Of course, I wouldn't want to live in here for any extended period of time, but it's perfect for what they're trying to do with this particular space. The communal space outside, too, fits very well within the design language that they've set forward, a bare-bones, minimalistic approach, the only bare necessities of what you would use at this sort of station, a sort of midway point between A to B. Now, although I wouldn't say Port Olisar's easy HABs are metabolism in style, I would say that they have important attributes of that particular philosophy. You see, it's designed based off of the idea of economies of scale, an economic principle wherein things can be produced more cheaply if they're produced in more mass, and also consequently can be more easily transported, more easily assembled, etc., etc. The end result being more of what you need, more HABs, more spaces to construct very quickly. But now let's skip ahead to the next stop, our Corp. Located prominently in the center of Area 18 are the new HABs of Corp, the giant city planet recently added into Star Citizen. Although it's clearly a bit more spacious, well-lit, and well-equipped than the ones in Port Olisar, they still adopt the narrative of mass production, and it really does make sense because of the story they want to tell about Corp. You see, the city planet was constructed in a very short amount of time, and so a lot of things would likely have to have been mass-produced. And so again, from that perspective, it tells the story well. The success of spaces like these, though, can be very much measured against their ability to serve the needs of the user. I like to look often to examples in the real world to provide inspiration, and so let's turn to the Nakagin Capsule Tower. Designed by Japanese architect Kurokawa Kisho. Very much like the fictional world of Corp, Japan had a high demand for lower income housing for working Japanese, as there was a massive boom at this time in Japan in population. Japanese wanted to find a solution that was unique to their post-industrialized society. Metabolist architecture was a solution that sought to provide an answer to this need by providing a style that could grow organically with the society in which it inhabits. Each unit, designed to house 1 to 2 working Japanese, cleverly integrated all the amenities you could need in 1972 as a young adult. Kurokawa was also careful to make sure that all of the amenities could be folded away and hidden when not in use. This had the effect of making the small space feel a little bit larger and more comfortable when they weren't in use. Designing amenities like this requires the architect or designer have an intimate knowledge of the size of a human being and what constitutes an adequately sized and comfortable space for performing the various activities and program that would be needed in a small living hab. CIG seems to do this quite well for their HABs in Star Citizen, though I would challenge the designers to think about other ways to make the space feel larger. Consider more foldable or collapsible parts of the space to make it feel larger and enable the user to use more of it. On the more micro level, the detailing in this space is quite remarkable. I very much appreciate this countertop's recess that allows for you to easily clean the surface off and keep water and liquids within that area, making food preparation and cleaning a lot more of a simple task. As you know, there's probably never going to be that sort of mechanic in Star Citizen, so the fact that they paid attention to this level of detail is, like I said, remarkable. The HABs also come with a very tiny bathroom that has everything slotted into the walls. While in real life I would find this to be very claustrophobic, I think the clever use of space is wonderful, and it truly does fit with what would be expected in this level of apartment. Back onto the macro level of detail, I do appreciate that there's enough room for couches, storage, shelving on the walls to have knickknacks and personal items, and the bed is also comfortably sized. I also like that there's a small desk and reading area with an interactable screen, and the entrance vestibule has a very nice cubby to place your jacket or boots as you come in. Now, my biggest issue with the design of the ArcCorp HABs isn't really on the inside, it's with the outside. When you step out of the HAB, the first thing you see is a double-loaded corridor. Now, in general, we don't like to do this in real life because it makes the space feel a little bit too claustrophobic. One of the other things we try to do at the ends of hallways is extend space with windows, something that I think that these HABs could have benefited from pretty well. The community space is also somewhat lackluster. I don't like that the window is horizontal, and in order to appreciate the city you have to walk up so close to it. I think that it could have benefited from being a double or even triple height space to be able to truly appreciate the scale of this city. It seems a shame to me that so much work was put into the city of ArcCorp and so little of it is really embraced here in the design of the HABs of ArcCorp. And this is puzzling, considering that there's an example already in Star Citizen that was done so well. I'm talking about the HABs of Hurston. The towers here on the left and right are the HABs of Hurston, and like the Nakagin Capsule Tower in Japan, feature a superstructure with a bunch of prefabricated units attached to it. The structure's design is truly memorable, and I think it makes it one of the most successful HABs in the game. Unfortunately, its interior is pretty much identical to that of ArcCorp's. That is to say that ArcCorp actually copied Hurston, and for that I'm a little bit disappointed. I was looking forward to a slightly different design language in ArcCorp, but I will settle for what it is. We can make the case that they are all from the same manufacturer. Since the HABs of ArcCorp are already so similar, I want to focus instead on the communal space because I think this is what ArcCorp could learn from. This space really does express the prefabricated nature of each unit, but more importantly, it really is utilizing the wonderful city outside by having a window in this double height space. Double height meaning there are two levels with an atrium in the center. This way you can really understand the scale of the city outside. Even more impressive about this design is that the designers understood that orientation makes a difference, like we do in architecture. They've oriented the building so that it catches the rising sun, bringing real drama to the space and leaving a lasting impact on the occupant. It pains me greatly to say that even in my profession, there are some architects that completely forget about solar orientation. It's such an important thing to making a space special, but also it serves a practical use in the solar gain of a space. Say you live in a warm climate. You don't want to be getting the sun all the time, or you're going to have to be paying a lot in HVAC bills. In the inverse, if you live in a cold climate, yeah, you want a lot of solar gain. I also love just how expressive the structure, the HVAC is. Everything feels so visceral, real, even if it's not. It's a believable space. I also truly appreciate the location of the communal space in the center and below. This is exactly where I would orient it. I think it's wonderful to have it in the center of the space, the center of attention. It's where people would actually gather. And they would gather not only because that's where people would be, but that's also because there's such a great view. Compare that again with the impact that the ArtCorp communal space left you with. It's different, isn't it? It really isn't making use of that wonderful view, and I would argue this is a much better vantage point than that of Hurston, and so why wasn't this space paid more attention to? CIG, I would challenge you to go back and redesign this because you have one of the most beautiful, awe-inspiring vistas in the gaming industry today. ArtCorp is the only city planet currently in existence in gaming. So really, guys, go back and think about how you can make this closer to what you did with Hurston. Really emphasize those views outside. Make it the first thing you see when you walk out of a HAB, and I guarantee you, you will leave people with an impression they will never forget. One of the first things you're going to learn in university is that there's no such thing as a completely new idea. Design is an iterative process. It starts from a precedent, an idea, a good one, and then you develop it further and further. The only difference between mediocre design and exceptional design is the time you put into it. Creativity is not some innate ability, something that you're born with. It's determination to work at something and improve it, to constantly seek out the better option. ZIG, you have an amazing idea here. Don't be afraid to go back and iterate on it. Make it your own for ArtCorp and adapt that design language into this. Inevitably, you'll come up with something completely new looking, and it will be all the more better for it. The Hurston HABs are so incredibly successful because they are consistent from inside to out, and I hope that we can see that in the future in ArtCorp. Thinking on these examples though, you might be wondering why we don't see Metabolist Architecture still in the modern day. In the last part of this video, we're going to explore exactly why it disappeared while going over the last two HABs of Star Citizen. Grim Hex. Never will you find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Okay, seriously though, Star Wars references aside, there's a real reason why we don't see this sort of architecture alive today. Now, in the world of Star Citizen, it makes sense to have the HABs like we see here at Grim Hex and the ones we see at Levski. These prefabricated pods make sense in an economy such as what we see in the UEE because they have the financial backing to support it. Also considering that at this point we have so many spaceships, our technology on sealing things and making them airtight would be way better than it is today, and thus sealing things, making the envelope, which is something that we still struggle with today in architecture, would be very well mastered at this point. And that really is why metabolism failed. Envelope. You see, trying to seal a bunch of individual HAB units and then attach them to a structural armature proved to be too technically difficult. Even with today's modern sealants, I very much doubt that something like this would be possible. The reality is that you, in terms of percentage, have exponentially increased the surface area of the exterior of the envelope, and thus you inevitably have a higher chance of failure. Remarkable as this building is, it remains today mostly unoccupied, and that's because almost all of them leak. It has gotten so bad that the collective owners of the building who currently occupy it have voted to actually demolish it. And so if you were thinking about going and visiting this incredible World Heritage site, it may very soon be gone, and would already be gone were it not for a number of people in the architectural community who have stood up to say that this is a building worth preserving. It's for this building that makes me view these HABs in a different light. You see, I really appreciate that these exist in Star Citizen. It is a very realistic look, at least in my opinion, at the future of low-income economical housing in an industrialized, space-faring society. I think we would definitely see this sort of building and architecture in some future version of humanity, if we even survive to that point. Virtually everything surrounding you in the room you are in right now is produced in this way, mass-produced in some factory. And it is a logical extension to assume that in some point in the future, when technology becomes good enough, that housing too shall be mass-produced. And while yes, you may argue that all the materials we use today are mass-produced, the buildings themselves are still tailored and assembled on site. Mass production is only now starting to come back. We're starting to pre-produce walls, prefabricate entire sections of buildings, and I think in a future like Star Citizen, we'll probably already have mass-produced entire buildings. So next time you step inside your HAB in Star Citizen, I hope you'll take a second to look around you and appreciate the amount of time and effort that's put in to designing each space you use. With the exception of the Corp community space, as outlined earlier in the video, I think that all the HABs in Star Citizen have been designed exceptionally well. There is certainly no need to go into this level of detail for some of these spaces. Stuff like that countertop I went over is never going to be used in any sort of in-game mechanic, and yet I immensely appreciate that level of attention to detail. So overall, and in conclusion, amazing job. And now for my special announcement. This year, I will be attending 2019's CitizenCon in Manchester, England. It's going to be quite a trip for me, and it's going to be my first CitizenCon attendance, so I'm really looking forward to it. I also want to set up a meet and greet with you guys, so if you ever wanted to meet me, this is going to be your chance. So be sure to head on over to the Discord, which I'll have linked down below, for our Armco community updates, where I will tell you when and where that's going to happen. You can also head on over to my Twitch channel, where I'll be doing more live announcements as we get closer to that date. If you wanted to find out more about the Nakagin Capsule Tower or support its survival, make sure you head on over to the link in the description. That will take you to a page that will help you support that building's survival. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. What did you think of the HABs? What would you like to see improved, and what sort of HAB do you want to see in the future? I've been Morphologist. I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, as always, I hope to see you next time.